Japanese whaling represents one of the world's most enduring and controversial maritime traditions. To understand why Japan continues practices that much of the international community condemns, you need to understand the historical, cultural, and economic forces that shaped whaling's role in Japanese society. Japan is an island nation with limited arable land and historically few domestic protein sources. For centuries, the ocean provided what the land could not. Whales, appearing seasonally in predictable migration patterns, represented enormous quantities of usable resources: meat, oil, bones, baleen, and organs. A single whale could sustain a coastal village for months. Whaling in Japan dates back at least to the 12th century, but became systematized in the 17th century when coastal communities developed organized whaling operations. Early methods were remarkably dangerous. Teams in small boats would approach whales with handheld harpoons and attempt to tire the animals through repeated strikes. Men died regularly. Boats were destroyed. But successful hunts brought such abundance that communities continued despite the risks. The cultural dimension went beyond simple economics. Many coastal areas developed religious practices around whaling. Shrines called Kujira Jinja were built to honor whale spirits. Memorial services were held for killed whales, expressing gratitude and seeking forgiveness for taking their lives. This created a complex relationship. Whales were killed for survival, but also revered in death. The contradiction was acknowledged rather than resolved. Modern Japanese whaling began in earnest after World War II. The country was devastated, its people hungry, and its fishing fleet destroyed. Whale meat became a crucial protein source during Reconstruction. An entire generation grew up eating whale in school lunches. It became associated with recovery, resilience, and national survival. That cultural memory persists, even though whale meat consumption has plummeted. Most Japanese people today rarely or never eat whale. The hunting methods changed dramatically with industrialization. Modern whaling uses vessels equipped with harpoon cannons that fire explosive-tipped projectiles. The theory is that the explosive kills the whale quickly by destroying vital organs. The reality is often more disturbing. Many whales survive the initial strike and die slowly, sometimes taking 30 minutes or more. Animal welfare organizations have documented this extensively, arguing that no method of killing such large, intelligent animals can be truly humane. Once dead, the whale is secured with cables and either towed to shore stations or processed aboard factory ships. The butchering is industrial and efficient. Workers use long, sharp blades to remove the thick blubber layer, often tens of centimeters thick, in systematic strips. This blubber is rendered into oil or processed for consumption. The meat beneath varies in color and texture depending on the whale species and body location. Some is dark red, almost purple, with a texture closer to beef than fish. This meat is dense, fibrous, and requires specific cutting techniques. Workers must understand whale anatomy to separate different muscle groups efficiently. The most prized cuts come from specific locations near the tail flukes along the belly, and these command premium prices. Internal organs are processed separately. The liver is particularly large and was historically valued for its vitamin content during times of nutritional scarcity. The heart can weigh hundreds of kilograms. The intestines are cleaned and processed. Bones are separated for various uses, ground into fertilizer, kept for display, or saved for traditional crafts. The thoroughness of utilization is point of pride in Japan. Advocates argue that Western commercial whaling was wasteful, taking only blubber for oil and discarding the rest. Japanese whaling, they claim, honors the animal by using every part. Critics respond that complete utilization doesn't justify killing intelligent, socially complex animals that are increasingly recognized as having sophisticated cognitive and emotional lives. The butchering process is coordinated and precise. Workers have specialized roles. Some remove blubber, others separate meat grades, others process organs. The operation resembles a factory assembly line, with each person performing specific tasks in sequence. For outsiders, particularly those opposed to whaling, the sight is disturbing. Massive animals systematically reduced to commercial products. For the workers, it's skilled labor passed through generations. Many come from whaling families with centuries of history. To them, abandoning whaling means abandoning identity, tradition, and livelihood. The cultural significance goes beyond the economic value of the meat itself. This creates the core of the international conflict. Many Western nations, having historically hunted whales to near extinction for lamp oil and other products, now condemn whaling as barbaric and unnecessary. Japan argues this represents cultural imperialism, outsiders imposing their values on Japanese traditions. The International Whaling Commission, established to regulate whaling, has become a battleground for these competing worldviews. Japan officially withdrew from the IWC in 2019 and resumed commercial whaling in its territorial waters and exclusive economic zone. The decision was primarily political and cultural rather than economic. The domestic whale meat market is tiny and shrinking. Most whale meat ends up in frozen storage because there's insufficient demand. Younger generations have no cultural attachment to eating whale, yet the whaling continues, supported by government subsidies and political will. Part of this reflects Japan's broader stance on sovereignty and international pressure. Yielding on whaling, the argument goes, sets precedent for yielding on other issues. The fishing industry lobby remains politically powerful despite the actual economic insignificance of whaling. The ecological arguments are complex. Some whale populations have recovered significantly since commercial whaling's peak. Others remain depleted. Japan argues that sustainable whaling of recovered populations is no different from sustainable fishing or hunting of other species. Conservationists respond that whales' intelligence, social structures, and ecological roles make them fundamentally different from commercial fish species. Scientific whaling, which Japan conducted for decades under IWC provisions allowing research, was widely criticized as commercial whaling disguised as research. The meat from research whales ended up in restaurants and markets, and the scientific output was minimal. This damaged Japan's credibility in international forums and hardened opposition to all Japanese whaling activities. The purse-seine fishing methods mentioned in whaling contexts actually apply more to regular commercial fishing operations. These massive nets can encircle entire schools of fish, capturing hundreds of tons in single sets. The method is efficient but controversial because it catches non-target species, dolphins, sea turtles, juvenile fish, creating ecological damage beyond the intended catch. When purse-seines haul in massive catches, the onboard processing begins immediately. Fish must be gutted, iced, and frozen quickly to maintain quality. Modern fishing vessels are floating factories with refrigeration systems, processing lines, and freezer holds. Workers gut and sort fish continuously, operating in brutal conditions: cold, wet, dangerous, and exhausting. The scale of industrial fishing is staggering. Japan's fishing fleet operates globally, exploiting fish stocks throughout the world's oceans. The efficiency that once seemed like technological triumph increasingly appears as ecological threat. Multiple fish stocks have collapsed under sustained pressure. The ocean's productivity, once assumed infinite, has proven finite and fragile. This connects to broader questions about human relationships with marine ecosystems. Traditional practices developed when human population and technology couldn't threaten overall fish populations. Modern industrial fishing, including whaling, operates at scales that can drive species toward extinction. The cultural and economic arguments that justified traditional whaling don't necessarily justify industrial-scale exploitation. Japan's position reflects genuine cultural values, political considerations, and economic interests of specific groups, even as the broader Japanese society has largely moved on from whale consumption. The whaling industry persists not because ordinary Japanese people demand whale meat, but because it represents something larger: tradition, identity, resistance to foreign pressure, and the interests of organized fishing lobbies with political power. The future of Japanese whaling depends less on ecological or ethical arguments than on domestic Japanese politics and generational change. As older generations who remember post-war whale meat fade, and younger generations indifferent to whaling gain influence, the political support may simply erode. But cultural pride and resistance to international pressure may sustain the practice long after economic and nutritional justifications have vanished. This leaves us with a practice that most of the world condemns, most Japanese people ignore, conservationists fight against, and the Japanese government defends on principle. It's messy, contradictory, and unlikely to resolve neatly. The whales continue to be caught, butchered with meticulous efficiency, and converted into meat that often sits unsold in freezers, a strange monument to tradition, politics, and the difficulty of changing course once culture and national pride become entangled with controversial practices.